Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Real Talks. I'm your host, David Steele. I hope everybody's having a fantastic day. And we have a couple of big things. One of them being we've got a couple new movies coming out, one which I saw last night. And I will be giving my full thoughts about that this weekend. And that was The Flash. So, the long anticipated movie with Ezra Miller, the DC universe continuing, Michael Keaton, and everything else. So that was interesting. It's finally good to get something that was 2 or 3 years in the making finally came out. So I mean, everything that has happened. So that was interesting to say the least. So that came out, and of course we have the Pixar film Elemental, which I've only seen the trailer once or twice, but it looks really, really good. And I want to go see it. Maybe I'll go see it tonight because it looks fascinating. Now I'm not going to do a spoiler cast for it, but it just animation is one of those. Before we get started, animation is one of those things that is so underrated today because we have all these comic book movies and these dramas, and so animation when it's done well. I mean, Across the Spider Verse is a perfect example of that it can really hit home. And I understand that was Sony, but so I'm really interested in seeing that. And the other one I'm really interested in seeing, and I need to get a laugh, is the blackening. I really, really, really want to see that. So I think I'm going to I'll definitely go see one of them tonight. I think because you know it'll be interesting to see how many people are in the theater. But I mean, there was some news about the Flash, and you know what, guys? I'm not going to do it today. I will definitely be doing a show tomorrow before the spoiler cast. So come join me. I'll tweet out what time it's going to be and all that good stuff. But we're not here for that today. So as I've been teasing in every single video, and every single show moving forward, um, so we're a little less than a month away from, I believe, what's going to be the biggest film of the year. And actually, the data kind of is a little interested, and I was surprised doing my research about this film and this franchise. And I'm talking about Mission Impossible 3. Mission Impossible 3 is one of those movies that, so Tom Cruise is in full Tom Cruise mode in this. So anybody who hasn't seen the first two videos, please go back and give them a watch. So what we're doing with this rewatch series is I'm basically going through and I'm rewatching every single one of the Mission Impossible films and talking about them and critiquing them and back in the day and how they hold up today and everything else. The first two films were interesting. Okay. Of course, the first one kicked off in 1996. So he started his own company with Paul Wagner, his CIA agent at the time, and so that's how they got started. And it was right in the middle of a time where TV films were starting to come into play. So you had like Beverly Hillbillies and you had the Addams Family. So this was right up their alley. So that was a good, solid film. And then you had Mission Impossible 2, which, is still here on the channel as well. And I thought it was to date. Now, I've seen all of them. It's been a while. So far, watching of the three films, Mission Impossible 2 is the worst. Um, and I think that anybody who's a Mission Impossible aficionado, if you will, who knows of the franchise, who knows of the films and everything else, they would probably put it as lower tier. Now, that all being said, excuse me, John Woo directed that second film. Now, don't forget, he was just coming off of Face Off. He was coming out of Face Off earlier in a couple years earlier. So that being said, it was it's not a surprise that he got that film for what it was. Now we're going from 2000, and it's fascinating to look at. It's not just Mission Impossible itself. We have to examine Tom Cruise. right? Because Tom Cruise, for what he did, because that's a big, big gap. Okay. I mean, we always talk about stars that go from, you know, a year or 2 years or 3 years. This is a man that basically waited 6 years to reprise this role. Um, and it's fascinating because of the roles that he actually did. And so, I mean, I just want to talk about a few of them because it's interesting. I mean, Tom Cruise is obviously the megastar in Hollywood. So between 2002 or two Mission Impossible 2 and Mission Impossible 3, okay, these were the films that he did. He did Vanilla Sky, okay, in 2001, which is a complete departure from what he had been doing, okay? He had been a dramatic actor. I mean, he got nominated for Born on the 4th of July and Magnolia, which he did later on. But so he does have acting chops. He does Minority Report with Steven Spielberg. This is in 2002. This is the Minority Report is really, and don't forget, okay, we just had, it was just after 9/11. So you're really starting to see things. Not that all I'm getting at is this about that Spielberg. You could, if you anybody who knows the film knows what I'm talking about in certain sequences and everything else. Okay, so after Minority Report, he then goes to comedy, and he does Goldmember. Really, Tom Cruise in a comedy? Who would have thought? Then after that, he goes back to drama. Okay, and he does The Last Samurai, which, by the way, I think Tom Cruise, for everything that he has, for all of the movies that he's done, is the best when he is acting dramatically. Hands down, Twice on Sunday. Okay, and I think that's where his real gem is. Okay, after The Last Samurai, okay, he goes and he does what I believe is one of his best works in Collateral. And mind you, that's not even Michael Mann's second or third. That's probably his second best film. Heat is his master class. Okay. Manhunter, which he did back in the 80s with Brian Cox, is probably his fourth or fifth best film. This was amazing. And by the way, that was the same year that Jamie Foxx won for Ray. Had Jamie, and he was nominated for Collateral. So that tells you something. Unbelievable movie. I love Collateral. Okay. And then to finish off, before he does Mission Impossible, he goes and he does War of the Worlds again with Spielberg. So you see the little, you see the dichotomy there, right? He's done drama, he's done action, and he's done, um, comedy. So it's interesting. So it's just fascinating to look at his career as a whole, in between who he is in Mission Impossible 2 and who he is in Mission Impossible 3. So that I just wanted to give a little context there because it's fascinating to see that. So 2006. Okay, now we're talking about, as I said, he did. I mean, by the way, you're talking about a guy that worked with two of the biggest names in the business back then. I mean, Michael Mann, Steven Spielberg, and Spielberg on two different occasions. Okay. Then, so 2006, we have Mission Impossible 3. Now we're in 2006 now. This is a completely different Ethan Hunt. Okay. And the last thing I'll say on this is, so to start out, it came out in May. So this was before Marvel took over what we know is the blockbuster and they own May. Okay. It was Mission Impossible. Mission Impossible Paramount decided they're going to release this the first week of May. And you have to understand this is when that whole shift started of, it was, the shift had began in really 2002, where Spider-Man had come out, okay? Because Spider-Man was supposed to be released in 2001. Of course, that tragedy happened. And what ended up happening was Sony had moved the picture to 2002, and it blew up. in May. So now, a couple of years later, we have another film in Paramount, okay, showing its teeth in Mission Impossible 3. And this is when the blockbuster moved from May, June, and July. Because up until that point, okay, up until that point, the blockbuster, quote, blockbuster season, if you will, had always been June, July, and August. So for the past 20 years, we have had a subsection, okay, or it's not a subsection, but we've had the 3 months move up. And now we're even seeing a couple of things come out in April, depending on, what's going on. Okay, so that comes out in May. And when you look at the films that actually came out in May, okay, in the year, okay, so the top grossing films in 2006 for the domestic box office, okay, were, so in May of 06, okay, were the Da Vinci Code, which blew up. I mean, it was the first time that Dan Brown, this was his first book. It was a blockbuster, I mean, everything about it. Then you had X-Men. This is now only in May, okay? X-Men: The Last Stand and Mission Impossible ranked third. Okay, I'm going to get to the numbers in just a minute. So in that particular year, okay, so the Da Vinci Code actually ranked fourth, okay, throughout the whole 2006 box office for domestic, okay. Ironically, Superman Returns was fifth. But when we talk about domestic, okay, Mission Impossible was 12th. I mean, you had films like Happy Feet, Casino Royale, which, by the way, was the whole reboot of the James Bond franchise. You had the Will Smith Click with Adam Sandler. I'm sorry, it wasn't Will Smith. That was Hitch. It was Adam Sandler. So you had that. You had Talladega Nights. So you had films that were doing really well. Now, I always talk about numbers, and yes, it's part of the business. Okay, so let's move to the numbers for Mission Impossible because that's an important thing. Okay, Mission Impossible, okay, had a budget. Mission Impossible 3 had a budget of $150 million. Now, that doesn't seem like a lot today, but it was quite a lot back then. It ended up grossing just shy under $400 million. So, not a bad take home, but when you look at the, some of the others, what I was surprised to find out, okay, believe it or not, is Mission Impossible 3 was the lowest grossing of all of the films. And I went, what? And we'll get to that in a couple of minutes because I was shocked. So, you had the original Mission Impossible made $457 million. Now, the original is always going to do well. Mission Impossible 2, which I did not care for. And I think it is because that, it's a sequel. Everybody wants to see what the sequel is going to be. Made $550 million worldwide. I was shocked. Okay. And then, Mission Impossible Rogue Nation, obviously, Ghost Protocol and Fallout. None of the films that I'll be covering from here on out, so basically, none of the films ever cracked. The highest film, which was Fallout, which was the last film, cracked $786 million worldwide. That's it. So, truth be told, though, it's made almost $4 billion at the box office. It's made $3.57 billion. So, all of that aside, because I think that all of that stuff is a necessary caveat to look, everybody knows what the story is, right? I mean, I'm not going to bore you with the story. Everybody that's seen the movie, okay, knows that Ethan Hunt is on another mission. Okay, it was originally based off the 1960s, television series, and I talk all about that in the first video. So let's talk about the people behind the camera real quick, because I think the crew itself. So let's talk about the cast real quick, okay? Before we talk about the crew, the cast was unbelievable in this movie. Okay, bigger than most. Okay, you had Kerry Russell, who made a small appearance. Okay, and her character has an integral part of the whole thing. Okay, I love Kerry Russell going all the way back to Felicity. Something I've been meaning to watch and want to watch is The Americans, but I love her as an actress. Okay, you have Michelle Monaghan. She is now put into the fold, and I love what they did about Ethan being a family man now. Right? He's going to get married. He's going to settle down. We think this could be the end of Ethan Hunt until this happens. And then what I was shocked, not shocked, but I think is the best film, hands down, is the best film. Okay, and I would go to war about this. Is Philip Seymour Hoffman. I loved Philip Seymour Hoffman in this movie. He is unbelievable. His gravitas, especially in the scene here where they get Hunt or they get Davies and at the Vatican and they capture him. By the way, and I'll talk more about that in a couple of minutes, but his gravitas is just amazing in the scenes that he's in. And how cool and collected and just amazing he is. And I think like I said, I think he's the best villain in this franchise. That's just me. Another thing, okay, is so let's, as I said, let's dive into, so that's your cast essentially. I mean, you have everybody else coming back. You've got Vin Rames coming back. You've got, Simon Pegg. You've got actually, yeah. So you have Simon Pegg coming back. So let's now quickly talk about the behind the camera, because I think that's important. So up until that point, okay, you had one of the best television series on television. Well, one of the best series on television was Alias. I loved Alias. I loved Jennifer Garner, but I loved Alias in general. And J.J. Abrams did that. Of course, he went on and he did Lost, and he's done several other things since. Of course, he directed one of the biggest blockbusters of all time, or biggest films of all time, in The Force Awakens. Okay, so he also co-wrote this. Okay, so not only did he direct it, which, by the way, was his directorial debut. When we always talk about directorial debuts, I mean, we just had two, at least one this year, but we've had the two that I can think of right off the top of my head. Okay, and I love the movie, and I know I'm a sucker for it, is A Star is Born, okay, with Bradley Cooper, and Creed 3 earlier this year with Michael B. Jordan. It is so hard to not only star, but direct your film, because you have so many different decisions to make, so many different things to make, time, money, everything else. So he didn't star in the film, but this was his directorial debut. And it's very interesting because when you see people get out of the gate, you always think, oh, this is going to be horrible. This was not a bad movie. It really, really wasn't a bad movie. I mean, it was the same premise, okay? But it was not a bad movie. And you're directing the biggest star in Hollywood at the time, in Tom Cruise. I liked it. Now, he did co-write it. That's so a couple of other notes, okay? Alec Kurtzman, okay? So he actually was a producer, okay, on the 2017 The Mummy, which of course Tom Cruise was in, which we all know what happened with that. I mean, that was, if that would probably be, honestly, that would probably be the one flop of Tom Cruise's career. That's it. That's it. The one flop. He's been acting for 40 plus years. That's the one flop he's had. So Al Kurtzman was a producer on that. And he also was a producer on the 2009 reboot of Star Trek. Okay. I love that Star Trek, by the way. I love that Star Trek because, and I believe the only reason why Abrams got it, so that really showed what his science fiction chops could be. Okay. Because once he got that and it did really well, then people started to take notice and go, okay, he can do sci-fi. And subsequently, he ended up getting The Force Awakens. So I really believe the fact that Star Trek, the 09 Star Trek did well, he ended up getting that. Now, of course, he ended up, Abrams ended up directing Into Darkness. So getting back to Kurtzman, and this is where probably they end up meeting. Okay, Kurtzman and Abrams. And that's why he ends up working. Well, they met on Mission Impossible, and then he ended up doing Star Trek and further other things. Now, Roberto Orza, okay, he was also a producer. Now, he was a producer on the Star Trek film, okay, and my guess is he was a producer on Mission Impossible 3. So that's where the things come in. Now, he wrote, and so it's difficult to write. Okay, it's one thing to produce, but it's more difficult to write. And that is Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen. Now, we just had another Transformers that came out a couple weeks ago. Revenge of the Fallen was bad. Call a spade a spade. It was bad. So, opening weekend. Now, how does this May opening weekend end up doing, right? So Mission Impossible ended up making $47.7 million opening weekend, which is not bad. Okay, was not bad for that time. And it ended up finishing with $133.5 million. Now you say, well, it made, yeah, but you got to remember, this is 2006. This is almost 20 years ago. Okay, so this is 17 years ago. So internationally, it ended up making right around $266 million. And worldwide, ended up grossing almost $400 million. So, that all being said, this was a success in their eyes to the extent of it's moving the franchise forward and everything else. As I said, this was the lowest grossing film in the franchise. And it was, let me double check that. But yeah, I mean, it was the lowest by almost $58 million. That's substantial. I mean, it's not just missing it by $58 million is a lot. So, okay. Those are all the numbers. And as I said, I'm not going to bore you with all of the beats of the film. You all know about that. I'm just going to tell you my thoughts about as I'm watching it. So, yeah. So let's start off. As the film starts off, okay, as I said, Philip Seymour Hoffman was fantastic in this movie. Okay, I was just watching Moneyball the other night, and you can definitely tell how well Phil. I mean, we lost him too early, but Philip Seymour Hoffman was a fantastic actor. No matter if he was playing Capote, okay, or he was playing Art Howe in Moneyball, or Owen Davies in Mission Impossible 3. And it's interesting that we start the film, okay, not in the middle, okay, but it's not right at the beginning. So what Abrams did is he kind of took a piece out of Quentin Tarantino's book. And what he did was he started it in the third act briefly. We see one scene, that's it. And then we go back to the beginning. So him doing that was a really interesting choice, and I liked it. It's not, you have to do it right in order to make it work. Um, all that being said, I think that, and Tom Cruise, I mean, let's talk about Tom Cruise is beat up here. He's captured, he's beat up, and we have to see our protagonist. How is he going to get out of this? And we don't see that until the third act, obviously. Um, it was a really good starting point for him, and I liked it. So, as I said earlier, this is a Paul Wagner and Tom Cruise production. So, this is the third film, not only the franchise, but they've done together. Um, the attention to detail. So, every time that we start one of these films, okay, uh, it's always fascinating to see how Ethan gets his mission, right? So, in Mission Impossible, he ends up getting it. Well, we suspect he gets it at the end, okay, um, through a thing on an airplane. And in Mission Impossible 2, he gets it through Oakley sunglasses, which he throws away and they explode. In Mission Impossible 3, it's a little different because they had those little disposable Kodak cameras. Well, he put it. So one of his coworkers, okay, calls him and says, "Hey, listen, one of your trainees got captured. We'd like you to go in and rescue her." And so he gets the mission through one of the disposable cameras, which I thought was fascinating. I mean, if you even go back, later on throughout the franchise, it's through telephones, it's other unique ways. I love that creativity there. So that's where it all begins. Okay, it all begins by Kerry Russell's character going in, which we don't see, and she gets captured. And then I want to call him Tom Cruise. Ethan's brought in and said, "Look, here's your mission. Should you choose to accept it, go get her." And Davies is basically toying with them. They rescue her. She dies, and then the puzzle is why. What did she do? So another person I'm not even talking about, and as we go through this this franchise, we're going to have many different secretaries. So, in the first one we had, uh, I would say, I wouldn't say Voight was the secretary. Okay, so we had Kittredge, who was the secretary at the time, even though he wasn't named. Okay, in Mission Impossible 2, you have Anthony Hopkins. In this Mission Impossible, you have Lawrence Fishburne. Lawrence Fishburne is the secretary of, or the head of that department. And so he gives a fantastic performance for what he's in. Lawrence Fishburne is a remarkable actor. So the fact that they were able to get him for this, truly amazing. So another person that really makes their mark and is introduced to this whole franchise, as I said, is Michelle Monaghan. So she's introduced as Ethan's girlfriend. So when we meet Ethan, he's about ready to settle down, retired, and he has to get called back. I loved her in this film, even though she didn't have a big role. She had a good enough. She had a role that was important and critical to it because she's questioning whether or not their love is real. And then, of course, he has. So in the meantime, Ethan's basically lying to her all this time. And so, the whole marriage scene was really cute, and it's really interesting to see. He really did love her and everything else, and I loved Michelle Monaghan. And moving forward in the franchise, she's used really, really well. She's not just a throwaway character, and that's something to be said about that. Okay. As I said, Lawrence Fishburne, in the very beginning, I loved Lawrence Fishburne in this, even though he had a small little role, and he was not, um, and the role was just perfect for him. Simon Pegg is back, as I said. Um, so when we get to the Vatican, okay, when they are about to grab Davy, okay, one of the things about this um, movie in this franchise, frankly, is all of the toys that they use. Okay, whether it's the lock picks or whether it's the um, anything you want. I mean, whether it's the camera phones, whatever it is, the book to hide the Bible, to hide the device to actually, get the camera links in, whatever it is. It's all of these little toys that they use. And that's the really cool part. This is a spy movie at its core. I mean, don't get me wrong, you've had a couple of other spy movies at the time. Okay. You had the Born Supremacy, okay, that was out at that time. Casino Royale had just come out. James Bond was just rebooting. Okay. Um, so it had to differentiate itself, but this was a really cool way to show all of the toys in play, whether it's a thing to break through the wall in the Vatican, whatever it was. And that really was great. And even when they grabbed Davy, the mask, I mean, it's just fantastic. How he's holding a gun to his neck and he's reading and he's got the voice analyzer. Unbelievable stuff. And in this film, I will say one thing. So in Mission Impossible 2, speaking of that, in Mission Impossible 2, okay, which I did for the video earlier, they use masks 6 times. Count it. 6 times they use masks. They only used one time because they realized that was way too much. And so you want less and more in this situation. I loved how they grabbed him. And so, I mean, that sequence when they're on the plane, it is just amazing. And so, he's threatening to, cut, Davies and let him go. Vin Rames, it's just, and he doesn't say anything. Davey doesn't say anything, but he basically, he knew he wasn't going to get killed. So he basically said, "You have no idea what you're into, Ethan." And even when he starts out, he's like, "Do you have a wife or a girlfriend? Do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to, I'm going to hurt her. I'm going to hurt her really bad. Your little blonde friend, that was fun." And that's what sets Ethan off. And it's just, he was so good in this. So good. Loved him in this. So that was it. So in all of these films too, you always have a couple of trademark shots, right? So you have the running scenes, even in Dead Reckoning Part 1, which we're going to be covering later on in July, and moving forward, you're seeing all of these running scenes. Now, there's actually happens a couple of times. Once is on the bridge. Once Davies is broken out, which, by the way, it almost felt like 2 different movies. Okay, you had the whole grab of Davies. Okay, and then you had Davies getting out. It kind of reminded me of like Skyfall in that respect. Okay, where in Skyfall, basically they were trying to get Silva. And so Bond basically tracks Silva down. You have to see him go through the training and everything else. And then he tracks down one of his proxies and then he gets to Silva. And then once Silva breaks out, okay, he has to then track him again and make him stop the near assassination of M. And then he has to go. And then in the third act, it's okay, we're going to get in front of this and do this. That was kind of like the same concept. Act 1 was basically trying to find out who killed. I'm blanking on her name. Trying to find out who killed not Michelle Monaghan's character, Kerry Russell's character, and Lindsay. Thank you. So, I mean, it was kind of Act 1 was trying to find out who killed Lindsay. Okay. And then once they were trying to figure that out, okay, Act 2 was going to grab Davy. And there at the end of Act 2, we see him break out. And then he has, his wife, and he basically wants him to go get the rabbit's foot. And Act 3 is him basically getting the rabbit's foot. I mean, I love Simon Pegg. Simon Pegg he's a fantastic actor in whatever he's in. But so once the building gets blown up and everything else, and he goes to the tech people and says, "What do you have?" So he's able to reconstruct the email to the Vatican. But Simon Pegg basically says, like, I had this professor that wanted to scare the underclassmen, and he said that he was, basically said that technology was going to eviscerate humanity and take waste to, parks and ice cream parlors and schools and everything else. And every time I see that, I think of the rabbit's foot, that there is something out there that the rabbit's foot is what's called the MacGuffin. The MacGuffin is that one thing in any film that the both antagonist and protagonist are after, whether it's the Ark of the Covenant in Raiders of the Lost Ark, whether it's the Infinity Stones in Infinity War, whether it's whether it's the Rabbit's Foot in Mission Impossible 3. So there's always going to be a MacGuffin. Okay. And so that being said, that's what that was. So, but it really was, you could tell it was, and it wasn't slow either. It wasn't slow. So the running scenes are basically something else that are staples and trademarks of every single Mission Impossible. The elevator scene. So when Ethan gets captured, right? Ethan gets captured after Davies escapes, and one of his Musgrave, okay, actually gives him something to escape. And so the elevator scene where he's laying down and whatever else, and he beats up the three guys, the guards. I'm thinking to myself, okay, this is really good, but it's not as good as Winter Soldier. And anybody who knows what I'm talking about, that Winter Soldier elevator scene is one of the best choreographed, unbelievable scenes put on film. So I thought it was good, but not great. So yeah, I mean, the other thing too is, so another staple of all of the Mission Impossible movies are the stunts, right? So for example, when he gets hit here, okay, now obviously Tom Cruise is on something, okay, that's going to jerk him back, but this is like a one take thing, okay. Good luck. I mean, there's CGI involved, but it's not what it is today. So he gets jerked back, but that's not even the best thing. So the scene when he's going to, actually in the third act, when his team is in Shanghai, and he's trying to figure out how to get the rabbit's foot. And by the way, you go from Ethan Hunt, the artist, not the artist, but Ethan Hunt, who's very serious, and he basically stops and he talks to Vin Rame's character. He says, like, look, because he comes up with the idea of to swing from one building to the other. And he says, look, you can get that gear here. Now, there's 2.5 hours before they kill my wife. Are you in? He's like, yeah, of course we're in. So they basically, you see Tom Cruise can just turn it on like that. So one of the scenes to start the whole thing was when he was going to jump off the building. Now, this is one of those crazy. Now, this is the shot where he's about to swing from one building to the other. It reminded me, by the way, it was a crazy, crazy scene, how the editing and everything else. I mean, GoPros were just starting to come into, be on the market and everything else. As I said, this is almost, 15, 16, 17 years ago. This jump, okay, and how they were preparing this reminded me of The Dark Knight. It reminded me of The Dark Knight when Batman's going to go get Lao in Hong Kong. And it's just amazing to see the scenery there is believable. Um, but yeah, just having to do that and the intricacy of it and having to and then to make it, by the way, to film all this and then be able to make it was incredible. So just unbelievable. And then, so the end of it, okay, excuse me, the end of it, we see this. He gets the rabbit's foot, okay, he gets the rabbit's foot, and Davies, there's a chase that ensues, so they lose him. And what ends up happening is that the whole team flies back, and then Lawrence Phillips, or not Lawrence Phillips, I don't know why I said Lawrence Phillips, Lawrence Fishburne says, we have something to talk about. And so what ends up happening is that now we go back to this shot here, okay, where Ethan is tied up in the chair, okay, full circle once again. We start with this, we're going to end with this. And this is where Davey basically says, I told you I'd kill you in front of your wife. Well, I lied. I'm going to kill her first. And so the fight ensues. And still, so it's just, so he ends up dying. Okay. It's really, I got to say, it was a little anticlimactic. I got to be honest. The way that Davey died was a little bit, anticlimactic. And I went, okay. I mean, I knew of it, but it's still, you want to see an epic battle, right? And he gets run over. I went, okay. And what ends up happening is because Ethan has this bomb, the same thing that Lindsay had activated in his brain, he has to shock himself. And that's when you see Michelle Monaghan's character basically, by the way, she's a nurse. So forgive me, guys, I forgot what her name. Oh, Julia. So basically, you see Julia, going to bring him back and everything else, and she's a nurse working in the hospital, and she thinks she lost him, but she has to handle the gun, and so she ends up killing. She ends up killing Musgrave, and then she goes back and brings him back, and it's that shot of after he's revived, and she's just beating down on his chest. And so, that's the scene where he says, "You did that?" She's like, "Yeah." So that was when the rabbit's foot was recovered. And then, so the last scene is I love the little shots of the established shots, like 2 or 3 of them. And then you see Ethan and Julia walking hand in hand. And she says, "Do you want to tell me why we're in, Beijing?" And he says, "Well, I work for this group called IMF." And she says, "What does that stand for?" And he says, "Impossible Mission Force." She's like, "Get out of here." It's like, "No, everything I'm telling you is top secret. This is classified." She's like, he basically says, "You can trust me." And that's when they go back and, as I said, basically, they are greeted back with Lawrence Fishburne's character and says, "This is for any reparations." The White House is called, basically teasing like this could be the end of Ethan, and saying that there's a job that they're very interested in talking to you about. And he says, "Let me think about it. I'm going to go on my honeymoon." And he says, just out of curiosity, what was the rabbit's foot? Lawrence basically, he says, "Tell me you'll stay, and I'll tell you what it is." He's like, "I'll send you a postcard." But it's one of those things where this overall, I thought I enjoyed this movie. I enjoyed this movie quite a bit. It had everything you wanted in a Mission Impossible film. Okay. It had the big action with the bridge sequence. Okay. It had the spy aspect of it, which is which was for the Vatican. You had the the other the other action with him trying to go get the MacGuffin, the rabbit's foot. You had the love angle. Okay, this had everything. This was a well-rounded Mission Impossible movie. And of the three, this one is my favorite so far. Now, I'm gonna watch all of the others between now and the 12th of July, and I'm gonna come back and doing these videos for you guys, and that may change. That may completely change. But as of right now, Mission Impossible 3 is the best one out of the three that I enjoy, my favorite. Um, yeah, I mean, and this goes to show you a couple of things. Number one, you don't have to make whole oodles amount of money to have something be enjoyable. Okay, that's something it's a fallacy. I mean, and we see it all the time with Rotten Tomatoes that basically critics will not like something and the audience will love it. They will absolutely eat it up. And that's how studios see that and they vote with their dollar. Because the critics only make up a very small, select portion of the whole general population, general audience. So it would be fascinating to see if somebody actually walked in and not said, okay, you're seeing this as a general audience, not as a critic, and see if their opinions would change. Probably not, but that's. So that is Mission Impossible 3. That is the J.J. Abrams directed film of 2006. As I said, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I had a blast watching it. I mean, as I said, I've seen it a couple times, but it was a fun, fun movie. Um, so, moving on. So let me talk about what's coming up, in the coming days and weeks. So, as I said, just saw The Flash last night. I thought it was good, not great. I mean, it has problems. I will be doing a Flash spoiler cast tomorrow. I'll figure out what time. So, guys, come back and join me for that. I'm gonna because we had some big news. I'm going to do a show tomorrow. Okay, talking about some of the news, and we'll get some of the numbers in there for the Flash and Elemental and everything else. So I'll end up doing the show first and the spoiler cast second. Um, and then we have out there right now the perfect movie of June. So that is The Dark Knight, which it's been out there for a couple of weeks now, and I love that movie hands down. Um, Mission Impossible. Actually, tickets for Dead Reckoning went on sale yesterday. I'll be getting I think I'm going to go see it the 10th for one of the fan events. But between now and July 12th, guys, you guys are going to be getting the other 3 or 4 films. Okay? Ghost Protocol, Rogue Nation, Fallout, and I'm missing one. And yeah, no, that's it. That's it. So there's only 3 more films left, okay, for the next 3 weeks. So it's going to be Ghost Protocol, Rogue Nation, and Fallout. And then they'll all lead up to July. We have Indiana Jones coming out at the end of June. And then, we've got so much stuff coming up for the rest of the summer. We've got, as I keep repeating, Mission Impossible. We have Barbie, which is really interesting. I saw that trailer in IMAX yesterday. I'm in for it. I probably won't do a spoiler cast about it. I might actually. We'll see what happens. And then, of course, we have Oppenheimer. And then later on this year, there is so much stuff, but that's later on. So, all that being said, if you do nothing else, guys, could I please ask you hit that like and subscribe button? That is the only way this is going to get out to everybody. I want people to see this. If you actually would like to do a little bit more, okay, and I know there are a couple of people that already have. if you would like to, give a little bit more, and you're able to, okay, you can support me in a couple different ways. Number one, hit that join button on the channel. Okay, I've added a couple of different levels. Before it was just the $2.99, so now I've added a couple of other levels. I think one is $5.99 and the other is $9.99, and you guys will be getting some perks with those. Okay, that's first and foremost. Number two, if you guys come in here and you're watching the stream and you want to drop a couple of super chats, I would be most appreciative. Okay, um, and and that would be awesome. Okay, and I will answer any major. So starting with Secret Invasion, I think any major things. I think if you guys have a lot of questions, I mean, if you guys want to talk amongst yourselves here in the chat, that's cool. Any major questions about Secret Invasion, I think I'm going to start to, if you guys could start sending super chats in for those questions, that would be great. And finally, we have, the store. So, well, we have the store. Okay, tomorrow is Father's Day, guys. So go to the store, pick up a T-shirt, a mug. There's jackets there and women's apparel as well. And finally, I'm going to be recording it later on this month. Okay, and that's my Patreon. I have two levels up there right now. $5 gets you Mob Mondays. Okay, I'm going to be doing another mob movie every single week. Okay, or I'm sorry, not week, but month. Every single month. So that's $5, and then $10 gets you another film. Rewatch Wednesdays. Films I've seen that I haven't seen in a while. So the two films are going to be Goodfellas for Mob Mondays and Training Day for Rewatch Wednesdays. And those will be up sometime by the end of the month. And yeah, once a month, guys, you guys are going to be getting brand new movies on there. And that's only exclusive to Patreon. You can't get that anywhere else. And yeah, that's I think that's about it. I mean, we have so much stuff coming up on the channel. Please, guys, as I said, if you don't do anything else, hit that like and subscribe button because it will go a long way. Okay, so that is going to do it for Mission Impossible 3 and the Mission Impossible Rewatch series, for this one at least. Stay tuned, guys. In the next week, next Friday, you're going to be coming back here and you'll be able to see the next film in the franchise, and that's going to be Ghost Protocol. So, 2011 film. Okay, guys, do the 3 things you need to do. Be safe, be careful, and have a great weekend, guys. Go to the movies. All right. I'm David Steele, and you have been watching Real Talks. Bye-bye, guys.